Most cybersecurity content talks about how to prevent attacks. Today, I want to talk about what happens when that doesn't work. Because if there's one thing 2025 made brutally clear is this: even organizations with decent security stacks still get breached. And when that happens, the difference between painful but manageable and extensional disaster is not a shiny tool. It's how good your incident response playbook is and how well you've actually rehearsed it. In this video, we're going to walk through a practical incident response playbook specifically for MSPs, and we will anchor it in what we've seen from the biggest breaches and ransomware cases in 2025. By the end, you will have a clear mental model for how to react in the first minutes, hours, and days of an incident, and what you should put in place now, long before your phone rings at 2 in the morning. Let's start with why this matters so much right now. IBM's latest Cost of the Data Breach report shows that an average global breach still cost organizations in the range of $4.5 million. The number nudged down slightly for the first time in years, but in the United States, the average hit a new record high. And the pattern hasn't changed. The longer an attacker sits in your environment, the more it costs you. Organizations that detect and contain breaches quickly pay significantly less than those that stumble around for weeks. Verizon's 2025 Data Breach Investigations report analyzed tens of thousands of incidents and over 10,000 confirmed breaches. One of the headline findings: exploitations of vulnerabilities as an initial access path has grown sustainably and is now responsible for roughly a fifth of breaches. Stolen credentials and identity abuse are right up there as well. And third-party involvement, including suppliers and service providers, has roughly doubled and shows up in about 30% of breaches. At the same time, threat intel from firms like Mandiant and CrowdStrike highlights two scary numbers: dwell time and breakout time. Dwell time is how long attackers sit on your environment before you even know they be there. Breakout time is how fast they move laterally once they get a foothold. In some human-operated ransomware cases, breakout times are measured not in a day, but in minutes. In the fastest observed cases, under an hour. Put that together, and there's the uncomfortable truth. If you're an MSP, you are now part of your customer's attack surface. And in 2025, we've learned that the question is not, will something happen? The question is, when something happens, do we already know exactly what to do? I want to take a step back and look at some patterns from major incidents we've seen in 2025. I'm not going to sensationalize individual victims, but there are common threads worth learning from. Across multiple big cases, from local authorities with shared IT environments to manufacturing and logistics companies hit via VPN appliances or third-party software, to professional service firms targeted through remote access tools, the story often starts the same way. Somewhere in the edge there's a weakness: an unpatched remote access device, a misconfigured cloud service, a forgotten test system, or a third-party integration that nobody really owns anymore. Attackers find it, often by scanning the scale. They get in, sometimes with no need for a user to click on anything. Then they move sideways, identify key systems, exfiltrate data, and only at a very end do they trigger encryption or extortion emails. When teams like Mandiant come in to investigate, they look at how the defender reacted. And over again, the same problem shows up. Logs were incomplete or missing. There was no clear decision maker. The first person who noticed something suspicious shut systems down in a panic, wiping memory evidence. Third-party providers and internal teams weren't aligned on who is allowed to do what in an emergency. We also saw how shared infrastructure can amplify damage. In one widely reported case, several local authorities that shared an IT environment were all impacted by a single attack. Business continuity plans existed on paper, but nobody had really practiced what it meant to run a public service in manual mode for weeks. And then there's ransomware. Surveys from vendors like Vian and Sophos show that while nearly every organization claims to have backup and recovery in place, only a fraction are able to fully restore their data after a real attack. Sometimes backups were also encrypted, sometimes they were too low, sometimes they simply had never been tested at the scale required. So what did 2025 teach us? The most organizations don't fail in incident response because they don't have any tools. They fail because they don't have clarity. No clarity on roles, no clarity on evidence, no clarity on communications, and no clarity on when to escalate and to whom. That's exactly where a good MSP playbook can change the story. Before we talk about the playbook itself, there's a mindset shift I want you to internalize, especially if you run or lead an MSP. Verizon's data shows that roughly 30% of breaches now involve a third party. European threat reports are very explicit about the rising role of digital supply chains and service providers in major incidents. Attackers know that if they compromise an MSP, a remote managed tool, or a popular SaaS platform, they can pivot into dozens or hundreds of end customers. What that means is simple. When a customer has a security incident, you are no longer just the IT support company. You might be part of the cause. You are definitely part of the response. And in many cases, you are the only team that actually has the keys and context to coordinate a technical recovery. So the incident response playbook we're talking about today is not just nice documentation, it's a core part of your value as an MSP. And if you design it well, it's also a strong argument in sales conversations. You are not just trying to prevent problems, you are prepared to lead when something goes badly wrong. Let's talk about the first phase of any good incident response playbook: preparation. IBM's data breach shows that organizations with a dedicated incident response team and a regularly tested response plan significantly lower the cost of a breach compared to those without structured response, especially when they combine it with security AI and automation. In other words, preparation isn't just about feeling better, it has a measurable financial impact. For an MSP, preparation means three things. First, you need clear roles. Who is the incident commander on your side? Who speaks to the customer's leadership? Who talks to legal, regulators, or insurers if needed? Who talks to the media, if it ever comes to that? If the answer is, we will figure it out on the day, you don't have a plan. Second, you need minimum evidence standards. Before anything bad happens, agree on what logs, backups, and telemetry you will have across all your managed environments. If your monitoring stop at CPU and disk alerts and you have no reliable logs or identity system, email, VPNs, and endpoints, your incident response will be flying blind. This is where guidance from agencies like CSR is helpful. They all stress that you can't investigate what you never recorded. Third, and this is where most MSPs fall short, you need to rehearse. Tabletop exercises are on the most effective and cheapest tools you have. Agencies even publish free tabletop exercise packages with realistic scenarios and guiding questions. Use them. Run through a simulated ransomware case with your team and with a customer. You will immediately find gaps in your contact list, your escalation paths, your backups, and your expectations. A written plan that has never been rehearsed is just a nice PDF. A plan that has been tested, argued about, and refined becomes muscle memory. Phase 2 of the playbook is detection and triage. The moment where someone raises their hand and says, "Something's wrong." Every major report for IBM to Mandiant to CrowdStrike agrees on this. The time between initial compromise and detection is one of the most important factors in how bad a breach becomes. CrowdStrike talks about breakout time, how quickly a human attacker moves laterally after the first foothold. In many cases, that's under an hour. As an MSP, you won't always be the first to notice. Sometimes a user sees something odd. Sometimes a partner calls. Sometimes, in the worst cases, the attacker emails everyone. Your playbook needs to define what happens the moment a suspected incident is reported. Who owns the initial triage? What information do you collect right away? How do you distinguish between a nuisance alert and a probable real incident without dismissing the latter? This is also where technology meets process. If your monitoring tools generate thousands of alerts, but your team is drowning in noise, you won't be able to meet any kind of ambitious detection objective. You don't need perfection, but you need a realistic target. For example, if a critical alert fires on a crown jewel system or identity, a human will look at it within minutes, and you know exactly whom to call. Triage is not just technical. It's also the moment you decide whether this is a business as usual or whether you activate the full incident response process. If you wait too long to make that call because you're afraid of overreacting, you risk losing precious hours at the worst possible time. Phase 3 is where many teams panic. Containment. Once you confirm that you're dealing with a real incident, not just a noisy false positive, the instinct is often to shut everything down. Pull plugs, reboot servers, wipe machines. From a human perspective, that's understandable. From an incident response perspective, it can be disastrous. Incident response teams from firms and government agencies repeatedly highlight the same mistake. Defenders reboot or re-image systems before memory can be captured. They change passwords without understanding which accounts are actually compromised. They make ad hoc firewall changes that break business processes but don't actually stop lateral movement. Your MSP playbook needs a clear philosophy for containment. Slow the attacker down and limit damage without destroying visibility. That could mean isolating affected devices from the network rather than powering them off. It could mean temporarily blocking certain high-risk protocols or VPN access while you investigate, rather than shutting down entire sites. It definitely means having a predefined list of what you will and will not touch before your incident lead signs off. For multi-tenant MSP environments, containment has an extra dimension. You may need to assume that compromise in one customer should be used to pivot into other through shared tools like RMM, PSA, or identity providers. That's why your own infrastructure needs its own emergency controls. Can you quickly rotate keys, revoke tokens, or lock down access to shared tools if you suspect that they have been abused? Containment is where you decide how big this incident will become. If you overreact and wipe away all traces, you will never really know what happened. If you underreact and leave doors open, the attacker will come back. Phase 4 is eradication and recovery, and for MSPs, also communication. Once you contain the attacker, you need to actually remove them from the environment. That typically involves a combination of patching, hardening, credential resets, removal of malfunctional tools, and persistence mechanisms, plus tightening of configurations that allowed that breach in the first place. In the incident-involved ransomware, it also means carefully restoring systems from known good backups. This is where the gap between theory and practice really shows. Ransomware surveys from vendors like VM and Sophos show that while almost every organization has backups, many cannot fully restore after a real attack. Backups shared the same credentials as production. Offsite copies weren't truly isolated. Recovery times were far longer than business-critical processes could tolerate. As an MSP, your playbook should therefore contain more than the sentence "restore from backup." It should describe which system and tenants are highest priority, which restore sequences you already tested, who signs off when trade-offs are necessary, and how you communicate realistic timelines to affected customers. Communication deserves its own mention. During major incidents in 2025, one of the biggest pain points we saw from the outside was poor communication. Customers, regulators, partners, and sometimes the public didn't know what was happening, what data was affected, or what to do. Your role as an MSP is not only technical. You can help customers craft clear internal and external messages aligned with legal and regulatory requirements. You can help them answer the 3 questions that always come up. What happened? What are we doing about it? And what should we do right now? A good incident response playbook doesn't just restore servers. It restores trust. The final phase is the one most organizations skip once the fire is out: learning. Every serious incident response framework includes some form of post-incident review or lessons learned workshop. The idea is not to assign blame, but to understand what worked, what didn't, which controls failed, which alerts we missed, and which parts of the plans were unclear. In 2025, incident responders repeatedly highlighted that the same weaknesses showed up across different victims: weak logging, unclear asset inventories, overprivileged accounts, fragile backup designs, and complete lack of rehearsal. These are all the things that can be improved between incidents. As an MSP, you have a unique advantage. If you handle incidents across multiple customers, you're effectively building a library of what goes wrong in the real world. You can turn that into better baselines, better onboarding, better monitoring, and new service offerings. The key is actually to close the loop. For every significant incident, ask what we will do differently across all our customers as a result of this, and write that into your playbook. So to bring this all together, 2025 biggest breaches didn't just teach us that bad things happen. They taught us that how you respond in the first minutes, hours, and days matters just as much as the tools you bought last year. As an MSP, you are now deeply embedded in your customers' risk and resilience. A strong incident response playbook is not a nice to have. It's the difference between being a partner who panics with them and the partner who leads them through the chaos. If this video helped you think more clearly about how to build and improve your own MSP incident response playbook, I'd really appreciate if you follow the channel, hit like, and leave a comment with the one thing that you want to change in your IR approach for next year. Your feedback helps us create content and truly useful for MSPs on the front line. Thanks for watching.